Hello, everyone. I'm Kat Timpf, along with Eric Bolling and Eboni K. Williams. We are the Fox News Specialists. A big sneak preview of James Comey's testimony to the Senate Intel Committee tomorrow. Committee releasing his prepared opening remarks a short time ago. There's lots to digest here, so joining us now with more from Washington is Fox News Chief Intelligence Correspondent Katherine Herridge.
Well, thanks, Kat. Look, this is really an amazing 7 pages of prepared testimony from the fired FBI Director James Comey. And when you read it, it's really one revelation after another, debunking a lot of the media reporting that alleged that President Trump had tried to spike the Russia probe. So let's begin with the first meeting that's documented in the prepared testimony, and that's in early January, and it was a briefing at Trump Tower between Mr. Trump and FBI Director Comey. And Comey was there to discuss the so-called anti-Trump dossier. That's the anti-Trump intelligence folder that made salacious allegations against the incoming president. And at that time, James Comey already discussed with senior FBI leadership whether he should be prepared to tell Mr. Trump that he was not under federal investigation. And it was at that meeting that Mr. Comey volunteered to the incoming president that he was not under federal investigation at that time over Russia's connections and meddling in the U.S. election. At a dinner later that month with the FBI director and now President Trump, Mr. Trump said to Comey, did he want to stay as FBI director? And I'm quoting here, the president said, I need loyalty. I expect loyalty. I didn't move, Comey wrote, speak or change my facial expression in any way during the awkward silence that followed. We simply looked at each other in silence. And then Comey says later in the conversation, the president returned to this same subject. I need loyalty. I replied, that's Comey, you will always get honesty from me. He paused and then said, that's what I want, honest loyalty. I paused and then said, that's what you'll get from me. After a February 14th meeting, the president raised the issue of National Security Advisor Mike Flynn. A day earlier, Flynn had resigned from that position. And Comey writes, the president stating, I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He is a good guy. I hope you can let this go. Comey then stated he understood the president was requesting that they drop the investigation into Flynn, but not the entire Russia probe, Kat.
So is that the way that they get around it, essentially? I know people have different views. Some people are saying this totally vindicates Trump, and some people are saying, oh, see, he's in big trouble now. I don't know what to think.
Well, you know, the words are going to be really important here. When you read the prepared testimony, the language right there is that he requested him to let go of this. He didn't order him to. He didn't tell him it was mandatory. And it was simply not enough, based on this prepared testimony, for Comey to go to his boss, the Attorney General, or the Deputy Attorney General, and say, I think we have obstruction of justice here because there is a corrupt intent. So it will be very important tomorrow to listen to the way Director Comey, the fired FBI director, delivers the prepared testimony, the tone of his language, listen to the words that he chooses, the pauses that he inserts into the testimony, and I think most significantly, whether he will take questions that go beyond this, because legal experts have said to us that if he doesn't take questions on this particular topic beyond what he states in opening testimony, that means it's still of investigative interest to the special counsel, Robert Mueller.
Katherine, may I ask you this, Eric?
Sure.
So I read these 7 pages here. It doesn't seem like a smoking...
I knew you would.
Yeah. I have it right here. I'm looking for the smoking
Good. I like
gun.
that. It's
I
good.
honestly can't find it. But what I also can't find is where James Comey outlines his testimony, his sworn testimony in front of, I believe it was Congress, not Senate, but Congress, and he never mentioned some of these things. He never really explains why he didn't mention these meetings that he outlined so thoroughly in this June 8th missive.
Well, you know, you raised an interesting point, because the fired FBI director says in this statement that it was routine, really right out of the gate, for him to document his meetings and conversations with either the incoming president or President Trump. But this was simply not his habit with President Obama, in part because they didn't really have a lot of communication based on this prepared testimony, sort of a handful of occasions. They either met in person or spoke on the phone. And even just in the first 4 months or so that President Trump was in office, he had almost a dozen conversations or interactions with him.
Catherine, very quickly, this is Eboni.
Sure.
So we saw that this posting went up on the Senate Intel website around 2 p.m. this afternoon, almost a full day before this testimony was set to be heard. What do you make, if anything, of the timing? How far in advance we've all gotten to come through?
I'm so glad you asked that. It seems entirely weird to me. Like, I've never seen such high-profile testimony released so far in advance, and it also struck me that it was really released within an hour of this morning's hearing that was behind me concluding. So maybe we'll get a better explanation tomorrow. Maybe it was an effort for people to digest what was going to be in that testimony. But I can't think of another case. Usually you get the prepared testimony like 3 minutes or 5 minutes before the hearing, and then there's an embargo until the hearing begins. But that was simply not the case here.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine. All right, time to meet today's specialists. He is the youngest person to ever be elected to the New York State Legislature. He was a president of the New York City Council, and he's the former chairman of Democrats for Trump during the presidential campaign. But he specializes in hiking in Wyoming and Montana. Andrew Stein is here. And he's a radio talk show host for CEO Radio 1000 AM, the founder and CEO of the National Diversity Coalition, and he was an executive committee member of President Trump's transition team. But he specializes in theological discussion and debate. Pastor Darrell Scott is here. All right.
I honestly think I figured this whole mess out. It's a charade that's been playing out. Comey said this, Trump did this, Comey took notes on this. Trump, after reading 7 pages of Comey's testimony we're going to hear tomorrow, you realize that Trump is unorthodox. He's not a regular politician, and maybe a longtime career FBI director, intel guy, is used to dealing with politicians. He wasn't used to some of the conversations with a Donald Trump who's unorthodox and not a politician. But then he can't go so far, and Comey can't go so far as to say there was obstruction of justice, nor was there interference, nor any request to look the other way on an investigation.
Let me ask you a question.
Which tells me if he's not willing to make that leap of faith, I'm not sure why we all should be.
Well, I don't know what he is or is not going to do, but let me ask you, if Bill Clinton said to Loretta Lynch, I hope you can let this Hillary thing go, would you be saying the same thing?
He did on 4 separate occasions said that he was never asked to end the investigation by Donald Trump. So, he said there were 4 discussions, but never once did Trump ask him to end the investigation.
So, Eboni, is he how he gets out of that, saying, oh, well, this was about Flynn, but it wasn't about Russia in general? Is that how he could get out of those previous statements?
Of course, that's how he can get out of it. That's the issue, right, Kat? And I mean, look, here's the thing. Eric knows how I stand on it. But he's right on this, Kat. Ultimately, there's nothing that makes a legal conclusion of collusion, a legal conclusion of being asked to stop the investigation. And it doesn't even seem like Comey, Kat, is going to testify to that. So absent that, we've got Comey uncomfortable, Comey not liking it, Comey not being used to it. But we don't have something that amounts to obstruction.
Well, of course, Comey wouldn't want to do that because then he'd be incriminating himself. That makes sense to me, at least.
Well, yes, it seems as if Comey, even in his communication with us, he was rather intimidated by the president. I mean, for a man to go to another man and say,
a tall man, a very, very tall man.
Don't leave me alone in the room with him, as if he's very intimidated by him. I mean, to be honest, Comey should have just had the stones to refuse and, or either say, I don't want to speak to you alone, take somebody with me, rather than to just, it seems like Comey is the head leaker out here. How's your own testimony leaked the day before you even testify?
I wonder, Eboni, does this kind of interfere with Trump's live tweeting plans tomorrow or not?
I would imagine so. I also don't know how happy President Trump was that this kind of rained on the parade. We're going to talk about it certainly in the show, about the announcement of his nominee to be the new FBI director, because that was kind of the news story of the day.
Let's also not forget, Andrew, that this was a big smoking gun, that James Comey took extensive extemporaneous notes, and one of the notes he took was after a meeting with Donald Trump, or after dinner with Donald Trump. Washington Post and the New York Times went ballistic about this, saying, hey, we got him now. We got him because there's an extemporaneous notes. I'm reading this, and he talks about the notes he takes after these meetings, and every single one of these meetings and the notes he talks about, none of them rise to the level of illegality, nor impeach, high crimes and misdemeanors.
Well, I think that the president had a good day today, and we'll have a good day tomorrow, because at the end of the day, there's really nothing here. You read Comey's letter, which I read quickly before we went on the air, and I don't see anything that specifically says that he deliberately tried to impede the investigation. So I think that if you look at James Clapper in Australia yesterday, he said that this is the worst scandal since Watergate. What scandal?
Can we do that? I think we have that soundbite. Can you do that, producers? You have that soundbite of Clapper?
Looks like it was just up there.
Here it comes. Glad you asked for it, Andy.
I think, compare the two, that Watergate pales really, in my view, as compared to what we're confronting now.
I think that comparisons to how it's the same or different than Watergate always have been and always will be useless, just because no matter what's happening, who cares? I care what's happening now. It's not going to be the exact same or exact different. Who cares?
And by the way, insane to compare the two. And, in Watergate, you had people admitting guilt to crimes.
Yeah.
We had actual crimes in Watergate. This, so far, as Hillary would call it, a nothing burger.
You know what? I want to say this. Here, Jim Comey does it again. Gives us a bunch of buildup, right? Just like we saw with the Hillary investigation. So much buildup. Everyone from both sides with their popcorn, with bated breath, as the kids say, where's the tea? Where's the tea? And how anticlimactic, right, Kat? I mean, this is such a moment where people from the left, people from the right have such anticipation as to what's going to come out of Jim Comey's mouth. And if these 7 pages are any indication, I suspect not very much.
To an extent, yes. There are things about it that bother me. I'm not saying that they reach the level of obstruction.
What bothers
again,
you?
as
I'm
we've
just
already
curious.
Well, it's inappropriate to even suggest about stopping an investigation. It could be very well be that Trump was doing that for personal reasons, and then you get out of it because Comey said he wasn't doing anything previously for political reasons, which makes those two different. I'm really interested to see how the testimony goes tomorrow. Still, there's people going to be trying really, really hard to make this an obstruction thing. It's certainly not a collusion thing.
Can I ask the pastor something? Let me ask you this, Pastor. So many people, and we talked about this a bit on the program yesterday, this issue of the independence of the FBI and how historically that has been an independent part of the executive branch, not to be usurped by even the sitting United States president. So much in what Kat talks about in terms of disturbing and uncomfortable, I think, is Comey describing what he feels was the president trying to maybe intimidate him out of that objectivity, out of that independence. What say you to that claim of that level of intimidation? And if so, is that appropriate?
Well, with Comey having been retained by President Trump, he would expect a certain degree of loyalty and commitment to his administration simply because I chose to retain you, when everyone suggested for him to fire him. And I think he thought long and hard about it. But I also believe that Mr. Trump is not afraid to rectify what he believes are mistakes. So rather than saying I shouldn't have hired Comey in the first place, he just fired him. But I think he shouldn't have hired him in the first place.
Well, and then do you think the fact that he did fire Comey after this conversation says anything about people might use that also? I mean, I don't think it's fair to call it a complete nothing burger. There's certain things that I have questions about.
Like what?
But it's not. I'm not saying it's a clear case.
Maybe it's a lettuce burger.
But,
yeah, it's like a person.
Okay, so it's a vegan chicken burger.
Comey seems like he's become the martyr now for the Democratic Party, though. He's a martyr. Now, when did James Comey become a martyr?
James Comey, prior to this, was first of all, he was beloved by the Republicans when he said Hillary Clinton should be. I'm sorry. First of all, he was beloved by the Democrats when he said, "Oh, there should be no indictment," right? Yeah. And then he was hated by the Democrats and loved by the Republicans when he said, "Yeah, but let's look into these email scandals because we found some on Anthony Weiner's," right? So he's been back and forth, back and forth. He's been the political animal over the last 6 months. He's getting what he deserves.
I believe he's going to get a good book deal out of it.
All right, well, up next, today's testimony from 4 top intel chiefs over Russia and President Trump, bursting a bubble for Democrats and the left. Stay with us.
On your mark, ready, set, let's go. Dance floor pro, I know, you know, I go psycho when my new joint hit. Just can't sit, gotta get jiggy with it. That's it, now honey, honey, come ride. DKNY, all up in my
The opening act for James Comey's testimony tomorrow proving a letdown for Democrats and the left-wing media. 4 top intel chiefs face the Senate Intel Committee today, and the head of the NSA and director of national intelligence dumped a ton of cold water on reports of interference from the Trump White House over the Russia probe and intelligence matters. Take a listen.
In the 3+ years that I have been the director of the National Security Agency, to the best of my recollection, I have never been directed to do anything I believe to be illegal, immoral, unethical, or inappropriate. And to the best of my recollection, during that same period of service, I do not recall ever feeling pressured to do so.
I have never felt pressure to intervene or interfere in any way and shaping intelligence in a political way.
And after hearing those responses, the committee's Democrats sounded more like a swarm of angry bees for the remainder of the hearing. Listen to these.
Let me just tell you, I just listened to somebody who should have known better talking about unmasking in a political sense, that it's done politically. And that, of course, is not the case.
I think that is a very, very damaging position to stake out. We're going to battle it out in the course of this.
Well, I think your unwillingness to answer a very basic question speaks volumes.
What you feel isn't relevant, Admiral. What you feel isn't the answer. The answer is, why are you not answering the questions?
That is what the questions are being asked about. Reports that nobody has laid the rest here, that the President of the United States has intervened directly in an ongoing FBI investigation, and we've gotten no answer from any of you.
All right, Kat, I want to get to you on this 702 re-upping, and that's what that hearing was supposed to be about. But Eboni, first with you on the, Admiral Mike Rogers kind of slammed the door very early in that hearing saying, 3 years have been around here, not one instance of it.
You know what, Eric, and I saw a look of disdain on his face because these are men that operate with a high level of integrity. That's why they take these jobs. That's why they're proud to do them. And I think even the suggestion coming from some of these senators that they were somehow manipulated or coerced, or that was the attempt, I think he found offensive, was my read on that. And I think that when some of these senators didn't get the answers that they were looking for, and see, that's the problem, Eric, when you ask a question with an intended or anticipated answer, and then you don't get what you want. See, I've seen this as a defense lawyer. You get all frustrated, and it shows.
Yeah. Hey, Kat, and so this whole hearing was supposed to be a hearing whether we should re-up the Section 702 of the FISA Act, which is really, really important. I think most people on that committee, probably both sides, bipartisanly agreed with re-upping it, but they spent most of the day on a Russia probe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because it was like the pregame for tomorrow's party, right? It's going to be a very, very long party. People, it's going to be the same kind of attitudes. We kind of saw what I think tomorrow's going to look like with Comey. And again, it's correct that until this stuff has gotten out of the way, other things are going to be harder. I don't think it would have been the same if James Comey's testimony hadn't been tomorrow.
And let me ask you, Pastor, one of the things I was hoping to hear today, because on this 702 FISA re-upping, was one of the issues that happened was during the course of the last year, Mike Flynn's name not only got unmasked, it got leaked. And the reason why they were talking to these people in the first place, how do we stop that so regular Americans' names don't get leaked? We didn't hear much of that.
Yeah, I know we didn't, and it's an issue that they don't seem to want to address. I see a lot of proof texting, and in my field, proof texting is when you begin with a conclusion, and then you search for evidence to support a conclusion. And the evidence might not necessarily be there, so you try to force detached or different isolated scriptures into your conclusion. They begun with the conclusion: Trump interfered with the election. Now, let's look for the evidence to support that. Rather than allowing the evidence to lead to a conclusion, they're beginning with a conclusion and looking for evidence. And in Flynn's coming up, they're trying to tie it all together to get President Trump.
I do think that that's clear, and I think the reason that that's clear is people are already calling for his impeachment before there was even anything at all whatsoever. I don't think that means that there possibly couldn't be, but it makes their intent clear, at least to me.
All right, let's do this, Andrew. We're going to get to you in a second. But leaks and unmasking also played a big role in today's hearing, and it led to this remarkable exchange between Senator Marco Rubio and NSA Director Admiral Mike Rogers.
Did, under the Obama administration, was there a significant uptick in efforts and incidents of unmasking from 2012 to 2016?
I don't know that. I have to take that for the record.
Who would know that?
To be honest.
All right. Unmasking. One issue, Eboni and I, we kind of go back and forth on this, how much of unmasking is legal or not. Certainly not legal to leak names once they're unmasked, though.
Well, first of all, I just want to address this issue of Russian interference in the election. Obama interfered in the Israeli election. I mean, it really interfered. He sent people there. He sent a lot of money to defeat Netanyahu. Clinton did the same thing in the first Netanyahu election. We murdered Allende, the CIA did, and sort of admitted so.
But we still don't, Andrew, we still don't want anyone, Russians or anyone else, meddling in ours.
We don't. But there's no proof that they've done it, and I don't think they have. There's no proof that they have. And, you know, on all these issues, the Democrats and the mainstream media are going so crazy. But show me the proof, Eric. There's no proof that anything has really happened in any of these instances.
Eric,
where's the proof that Russia is?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Beat Eric. Yeah, no, because essentially, I'm joking, but Andrew, you're making an argument that is factually absolutely accurate that Eric has made time and time again, which is we can talk about questions, we can talk about investigations, but up and until this point, there's certainly no evidence to make that conclusion or support it.
Kat, let me just talk to you a little bit about this 702 Act, the FISA Act, 702 section. It allows us to go, when foreign actors, bad actors, it allows us to gather intel, digital intel, communications between them. But when there's an incidental contact between a foreign bad actor and an American, a U.S. citizen, it's supposed to remain masked unless absolutely necessary.
Well, the standard is if it provides, quote, some value to foreign intelligence officials, which is obviously very broad. So whenever we talk about this, we're usually talking about in a political context. If you're conservative, you're talking about, let's get Loretta Lynch in trouble. If you're a Democrat, let's get Trump in trouble. We need to talk about, that's not okay, that standard, in my opinion, is too broad. Let's take a look at that overall.
Would you want that
I would like to have that looked at.
And removed?
I'd like to have it looked at or at least narrowed.
Gotcha. All right, President Trump names his new choice for FBI director. Can it help the president gain the upper hand against the left's Comey hysteria? We'll be right back with that.
So even with all these new developments surrounding the upcoming testimony of James Comey, President Trump nominated his pick to lead the FBI today, Christopher Wray. The president is receiving praise for his pick, but Fox's own Judge Andrew Napolitano has an interesting take on the nod.
This also indicates to me a little bit of a rift between the Justice Department and the White House, because this is not somebody that was interviewed by Jeff Sessions or Rod Rosenstein. This person was interviewed by the president, meaning all the people that the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General interviewed on a Saturday and a Sunday at the president's instructions. He was not in that list, and he was the last person the president.
Well, what do you make of that?
That the president decided to make this decision on his own, irrespective of what his team at the Justice Department advised.
So how will the president's pick impact the issues surrounding the Trump administration and perhaps more importantly, the Russia probe? Eric, is this a disruption decision made by the president here?
I was going to ask you this, Eboni, because when I heard it this morning and looked into Christopher Wray's background, he's a career litigator, right?
Yes.
So it could be seen as Trump could have found someone a lot more political, a lot more friendly to Trump. Christopher Wray worked for the Bush White House as well, right?
He did.
It seems like it would be the most acceptable FBI director if Trump were trying to be apolitical for an FBI director.
So it's so interesting, Eric. So on one hand, I agree totally. He's definitely non-political, never held an elected office, spent his whole career at the DOJ or in private sector legal practice. But there's this name that comes up when you look up this guy, and it's Chris Christie. Yeah. And so some people are going to want to connect those dots. And my question to both you, Kat, and really the whole panel, Andrew and Pastor, how do you think the Chris Christie connection plays into this for some people?
It's larger than Chris Christie. It's reported that he's donated to Republican candidates in the past. However, he didn't donate during the 2016 election. He's given to people like John McCain, for example. And if you're someone who's going to sit there and say that because he donated to John McCain, that means he's going to be impartial towards Trump, then you're just really not paying attention at all. So if anything, if he's donated to Republicans in the past and not in 2016, that suggests that he wouldn't be a fan of President Trump. I don't think that that's something that you're concerned about, but of course everyone's going to find a problem. I saw a piece in the Rolling Stone today that said the fact that Trump nominated him means there shouldn't even be a hearing, because he shouldn't be nominating the person to be investigating him.
Ridiculous, right?
Right, but it's not just up to him no matter what.
Yeah, but Pastor, I mean, for those that have the Chris Christie concern, that say, well, we know that Christie was an early surrogate of the president. We know that Christie himself is a little bit too hot on the block, so to speak, to put into the administration by most standards. But this was Christie's defense lawyer, and maybe this is somehow connected.
Well, I think it's just a recommendation. Christie has been a friend of President Trump's, and he simply said, I know a guy. I know a guy that I think you should interview and see if you like him. I like him. I think you might like him. To be honest, right now, anybody's an upgrade over Comey. Barney Fife is an upgrade over Comey right now. And whoever President Trump picks is going to invite scrutiny. If Elliot Ness came back from the dead and he appointed him, you would have his critics say he just did that because he came back from the dead. So I'm comfortable with this. I think it's all right.
Andrew, and one thing I do like about this pick is he was also the prosecutor in the Enron big scandal. And a lot of people have said that they were too big to prosecute, but here you have this attorney going after them and being successful.
You know, he's got impeccable credentials. And I know Donald Trump's in 73. I think he wants to always get the best people. But can I say something personal about him? You know, people don't realize this because he's so controversial with the Democrats and the mainstream media. But when Bob Kraft, our friend from the New England Patriots' wife was dying, he called him every day. When David Friedman, who's now ambassador to Israel's wife, passed away, he spent 3 hours in a car going out to Nassau County so he could make the Shiva. When my dad was sick, he was incredibly kind. So, you know, people don't see that about Donald Trump. You know, they just see the stereotype the Democrats portray, and he is a controversial character. But there's a warmth there and a loyalty to people that he really likes that I've seen on a personal level that I don't think many people see.
I haven't seen it, and I still like this pick. So there you go. I think it's good. I think he's had national security experience, federal investigative experience. He also was overseeing operations after 9/11, so he works well in a crisis.
No, I would love Trey Gowdy to have been that pick, and I know he said he wanted to pull himself out of that mix, but I would tell you, you lean on him and say, the country needs you, Trey. Go get him.
He's a heck of a prosecutor.
I would have liked to see Ray Kelly, too.
ISIS launching a stunning suicide attack on the heart of Tehran today. And the Iranian government is now blaming the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. What? Stay with us. We'll be back.
Welcome back to the Fox News Specialists. Our specialists today are Andrew Stein and Pastor Darrell Scott. Let's continue the conversation. ISIS striking two of Iran's most powerful symbols in brazen terror attacks today. Iran's parliament building and the tomb and founder of Iran's revolution. At least 12 people are dead, dozens more wounded. Bizarrely, Iran's Revolutionary Guards are blaming the United States and Saudi Arabia for having a role in spawning the attack. Does this mean that Iran will respond by trying to further destabilize things in the Mideast? This is what makes relations in these areas so tough. This is a perfect example of why it's so tough.
So, you know, it's like the kid who smokes while he works in the fireworks factory, right? So Iran is like the state sponsor of terror globally. Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, almost any, the Muslim Brotherhood, almost any major terrorist group has been funded at least in part by Iran, right? And so now one time there's an attack, and now all of a sudden they're blaming us for an attack on you know, a very low-level attack. But, boy, I got to tell you, you're crying wolf in the wrong place.
Exactly. Like, they are not the people to ever make that argument. I don't know how in the world you expect anybody in the world to empathize with you when, like Eric's saying, you are the primary sponsor of terrorism across the globe. So they're just not in a position to make this argument anywhere I can see.
And Trump is doing a good thing by bringing Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states in an alliance against ISIS and against Iran. So I think his Mideast trip was really successful.
Well, you know,
and he's arming the Kurds.
Blaming has become an international activity anyway. I mean, blaming in America is rampant. No one wants to take responsibility for anything that's perceived as negative. And now that mindset is spread across the globe. And so now it is extended even unto these terrorist activities, even though terrorists don't believe that they're terrorists. You know, a lot of people call the terrorists religious fanatics. They're not necessarily religious fanatics. They're religious zealots. And they are so fundamental in their literal interpretation of the Quran that they think that they have such faith in the promises of the reward for jihad and martyrdom that they're willing to give their life for it.
At the same time, I think it's absolutely true that sometimes when you decide who's the most credible source, you, even if it's subconsciously, think, who's the source of telling me what I most want to believe? So that makes it a little more.
I want to ask the pastor this about the issue of ideology and kind of from the religious standpoint. Because, you know, like you said, you know, religious fanatics, and there was a time where sometimes terrorists felt like they were doing something in the name of. But with this type of terrorism we're seeing now, Pastor, there is no in the name, I mean, in the name of jihad, but it's just destroying our way of life by any means.
But they're doing it not in the name of jihad, they're doing it in the name of Islam. Islam means submission, but it doesn't mean.
But you never see anything in the Quran about destroying an entire Western civilization.
Islam doesn't mean submission in the sense of submitting one to another, as the Bible says. Islam means submission to Allah by any means necessary. And so with
But where are they getting that part, though, Pastor, that that means destroying our way of life?
In the Quran that says death to infidels. And so when they hold to a literal interpretation of the Quran and they're zealous in their religious fervor, and they look forward to the afterlife and the rewards of the afterlife rather than the disenfranchisement of this present life, I mean, it's understandable if you're in their situation and you believe the way they do, why they do what they do, and they don't see anything wrong with it.
It's an interpretation.
So scary. It's an interpretation,
course,
right?
And a radical interpretation at that. And by no means does anyone suggest that it's a majority or even a large minority. But remember this.
But that's all it takes.
There's 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. If 50% are absolutely peace-loving Muslims and another 49% are moderate and they have no opinion one way or if 1% of Muslims in the world are radicalized, it's 16 million.
I will say this. I will say this. For every one that acts, there are 10 that believe the same way.
There was a poll.
They just won't act on it.
There was a poll in London, I think it was a Gallup poll about 4 years ago, which showed that 29% of the Muslims in London believed in jihad. That's scary.
All right, we gotta leave it there. Gotta leave it there, guys. A new report says Russian hackers may have planted a fake story on Qatar's state news website, helping lead to the diplomatic crisis between the Gulf state and the U.S. and other Arab countries.
Alrighty, time to wake up America. A bloody week in Great Britain and carnage marking the start to Ramadan appears not to be a coincidence. Britain's MI5 is tracking 500 active investigations right now, with some 23,000 potential jihadists feared operating throughout the country. Yet, liberals say nothing is wrong. Liberals like HBO's John Oliver suggest Britain isn't worried about terror. He calls people like me out, people who warn that importing the Euro style of political correctness is somehow Islamophobic. Here's John Oliver just hours after the latest terror attack on British soil.
Honestly, it was an uplifting demonstration of quintessentially British defiance, because the British people are never going to let terror change their way of life. And if you need proof of this, just look at this footage of people being evacuated from the scene. You see that one guy there? He refused to leave his pint of beer behind. That is a one-man walking, keep calm and carry on poster.
Sorry, John Oliver, real Brits are actually worried. You know, the ones who travel without security details, on the tube, on the metro, walking the Westminster Bridge, sightseeing, or sharing a pint with a friend. They fear more terror. Ramadan still has 17 days to go. Look, not all Muslims are evil, but there sure seems to be many who have radicalized. And understand this, John. Being stuck on stupid, pretending everything is okay, isn't proud or British or tough. It's just what I said. It's stupid. So your fake outrage, invective comments, getting a few laughs from the audience won't fix the problem. Political correctness went wrong in Europe and became deadly. Let's not copy them. And let's not pretend everything is okay, because it's not. Terror has a stronghold in Europe, and it's creeping towards our shores. So let's stop it before it gets here. And to John Oliver, just because you have a British accent doesn't mean you speak for average Brits anymore, because I have spoken to them, and they are worried about the can of worms Europe has opened and an emphasis on worms. But, hey, John Oliver, Mr. Regular Brit, your limo is waiting outside the HBO studios. Driver has the door open, and your security detail is ready to escort you. You, a regular Brit, not bloody likely. Pastor, your thoughts on that? Now, a little bit harsh on John Oliver, but look, this idea of everything's going to be okay, don't worry, terrorism it isn't going to affect us, is deadly.
Yes, it is. Listen, you can't be so politically correct that you're socially incorrect. And that's what's going on right now. You can't compromise the good of the whole because of the ideas of a few. Now, he wants to convince, or he wants to, once again, convince society everything is all right. Don't worry about a thing. Go about business as usual. No need to watch out. No need to look. We're going to be all right. This is just a few isolated attacks. No, it's happening on a more and more frequent basis. It's going to get worse, not better. He better lock it down, and he better watch out.
Eboni, John Oliver, like I said, security detail, well armed, I'm sure. Yeah. Limo driver. Does he speak for regular people, regular Brits, or Americans?
I mean, look. Easy for him to say. Let's talk about what at least Americans are saying. So I've got two really good friends, Eric. They turned 35 this year, two of my college girlfriends, both married. So we're going to take this big international trip. And they're both working on family, so they can't travel to Zika places. So we're looking at Europe. And one of them wants to go to Paris. Her husband says flat out, absolutely not. It is not safe. And this is the reality, Eric, that most Americans, and I do think, I'm sure, many Brits and many French people are experiencing, whether you like what's going on, whatever, it's not a political conversation anymore. This is a matter of survival at this point.
So, Kat, so is the... And open up to a bigger picture. So what they've done in Europe is allowed open borders. They've taken in a lot of refugees, allowed people to travel from country to country. It became dangerous. Isn't that the point we're trying to make? Let's not become like Europe.
I have said 0 times that I ever want what we do in this country in terms of immigration to become like it is in Europe. I've absolutely never said that. So yeah, I agree with you there. I also think that Europe, because it's different, does have problems that we do not have. And that we need to be careful to not have. I don't, in general, when it comes to terrorism as a whole, maybe not in Europe, but let's say here, I don't think, what is the good in talking about how afraid we are? Right? They want us to be afraid.
So
that makes them happy. That makes them dance around. They're so happy that we're afraid.
Political correctness week on terror ideology.
Very anti-political correctness, by the way. Very anti that. But I think that's different than saying you're afraid.
Well, okay, so... Andrew, let me ask you this. What is New York doing differently than London is doing? Because we haven't had that awful terror attack perpetrated here yet.
Well, I think first of all, our Ray Kelly did a fantastic job in surveilling the mosque. And David Cohn, too, our head of intelligence and terrorism, they both did a terrific job. Bratton did a good job. And also, the Muslim community is much more integrated in here than it is in Europe. In Europe and France and Britain, there are separate areas there where people just don't go, even the cops. So we're a much more integrated society. I think our guys are much more on the ball, our intelligence people and the New York Police Department. And thank God we haven't had the problems they've had. Also, remember, in Britain, it's a lot larger, in France, a lot larger percentage of the population than it is, let's say, in New York.
All right, one quick thought.
There's a difference between fear and caution. If I'm going to err, I'm going to err on the side of caution.
All right, we'll leave it right there. When we come right back, we're going to circle back with our specialists, Andrew Stein and Pastor Darrell Scott. So, go away. Don't go away.
Let's circle back with our specialist today, Mr. Andrew Stein and Pastor Darrell Scott. All right, Pastor, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
Take us on in. I know you know how to close. Favorite scripture? I know there's tons, but give me your favorite one.
Better is one handful with quietness than both the hands full with travail and vexation of spirit.
Amen. All right. Andrew, for you, this is my quick question. You were the youngest to ever serve in the New York
State Assembly.
23 years old. Intimidated, or was that just you getting started?
Well, first of all, I think politics was a lot more, it was tough, but a lot easier in those days. You didn't have the social media, you didn't have the internet, and it was more fun. So I had a great time. I loved it, and you know, I always wanted to be in politics. I grew up, you know, idolizing Bobby and Jack Kennedy, and it was a thrill, and when I think about it, I was really young. I was 23. I must have had somebody watching over me.
My circle back is for Pastor Scott. While he's delivering that monologue, the Wake Up America, I saw the pastor of the peripherally shaking his head yes and no, and you said something to me in the break. You said what about terror?
It's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. You know, I look at things from a different standpoint. I look at it from a biblical standpoint, and according to my eschatological interpretations, it's going to get worse. Then it's going to get better for a minute, then it's going to get worse again, then Jesus is coming back.
Okay. I'm going to ask you, would you have any advice for James Comey tomorrow? I know Trump just said good luck. Well, what advice would you have for James Comey?
Good luck.
That was kind of great. But...
Man up.
Okay.
Man up, James. Oh, and go Cavs.
Okay.
Cleveland Cavaliers tonight.
Do you know if the Cavs win one game, it might be a miracle on your watch?
Cavs are going to win this series. You heard it here first.
We're fighting a losing battle. I told the pastor before the show, get his room out. The
Go Cavs.
is coming.
Steph Curry. Oh, my God.
Steph Curry for the shot,
Pastor.
Good. Double dribble Curry.
I don't. I'm a big New England Patriots fan. I'm a passionate Patriots fan during football season.
Lord, here we go. Well, thank you to our Fox News specialists today, Andrew Stein and Pastor Darrell Scott. And thank you for watching. And make sure you follow us on social media at Specialist FNC on both Facebook and Twitter. And remember, 5 o'clock will never be the same. Special report with Brett Baer up next.